What is up everyone, 'tis I, Z Gaming Guy, and welcome to today's video. Now as the title suggests, we are going to go through 10 different genres in video games, and I'm going to give you the best game in each genre according to me. So, like I said, this is going to be opinion based, so if you think something else is better, I guess you're wrong, because this is objectively the best list. But of course, should you disagree with anything, I'd love to hear it in the comments on what you think. And also, this is just based off of what I played. Of course, if there's something I haven't played, like Breath of the Wild, for example, I can't have that participating because I haven't played it, so that would be ridiculous. With that said, one other thing to note is that this is in no kind of ranking, this list. I have it just in alphabetical order in terms of genre, so just keep that in mind. Now let's start off with the first genre, which is adventure. The adventure genre is quite interesting because typically the adventure is almost it's in combination with something else, whether it be hack and slash, RPG, or whatever. But you certainly have some that you definitely would put adventure at the forefront. For example, a Zelda series I would definitely consider an adventure. And of course you have the recent God of War, which was debated upon, but I think overall that would be adventure, which made this list even harder because I really, really liked the game. But I have to go with only one other game that is just the whole reason why I bought the PlayStation, and that is...
We don't have to do this. You know that, right?
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done.
Yes, it's The Last of Us. It is absolute masterpiece of a game. Like I said, the reason I bought the PlayStation, among other things eventually, but The Last of Us is just so engrossing, and it's one of those games where if in the first 15 minutes you don't cry, you're not human. And while yes, the game has a very good story and very good interactions between Joel and Ellie, this is about adventure. And the adventuring part of it, I think, is very good as well. Because you need to search for ammo because you are very low currently, or you just want to find other secrets. I found myself wanting to explore constantly. Just think of the first time you stumbled across a door where you needed to use a shank to open it up. That was pretty cool, because all you could think is, well, if I need to sacrifice a shank, what goodies could be over here? Granted, the first time I opened it, I was expecting, a bazooka or something. I was like, oh, going out of my way for a bazooka, I could see that. But, I was still really stoked to get a bunch of components for crafting and whatnot. And then you, of course, had multiple ways to go about a problem. You could directly go through it, you can go around, there's different routes typically. So the reward for keeping an eye on your surroundings and exploring better is definitely there. And as I mentioned earlier, the story is just so good that by the end of it, it sticks with you. The decisions that are made by some of the characters, you definitely remember it for quite some time, and it is turned into a very legendary ending, in my opinion. Okay, next up we have the fighter genre. While I am no fighter genre connoisseur, I do like me some good beat-em-ups, I've played a lot of Mortal Kombat in the day. Street Fighter was one of my first games I ever played, so I definitely enjoy the fighter genre to a degree. And picking one was kind of hard because, of course, the Mortal Kombat 9, very good game, pretty cool story. I really liked it. But the one I have to go with is due to a certain mode which just made it go way ahead of everything else. And that game to me is Soul Calibur 3. Now why Soul Calibur 3 in particular, you might ask? Well, if you'd play the game, you might know that there's a certain mode called Chronicles of the Sword. And in this mode, you create your own character, which is always a bonus for me. You give him his own coloring of costumes and all that nonsense. Once you're happy with that, you choose a class, which is basically the soul of an actual person in the game. And you have their movesets, and as you level up, you unlock more souls. And once you beat the campaign, there's its own special campaign with it, then you unlock more souls. So the replay value was tremendously high. Me and my friend played it constantly. We would both create our own characters. While you only use one controller, you just trade off once your guys are in battle. And while you're not in battle, there's a over-the-top view, kind of like a game board of sorts, and you move your people around to different towers, conquering them to heal up in there. And if you either get your own main tower destroyed, you lose, or you can go over and destroy their main tower, or maybe a particular character, and then you win. So there's a pretty cool layer of strategy there, but then once you actually enter the fight, that's when you get to flourish in all your glory with the character you've chosen. You will occasionally stumble across bosses, which are just the characters from the game instead of just some random fodder. The random fodder themselves can be quite a pain in the ass, but the bosses in particular, Cervantes, please, I have nightmares from you, don't ever hurt me again. I can see if you're more of an online fighter, this might not be the best pick for you, but as someone who prefers single player things and offline modes, this was fantastic. The most replay value I've ever gotten from a fighter game, and I couldn't recommend it enough, and I really hope that the newest Soul Calibur coming out is something similar. I know they have a custom created character thing, so who knows, fingers crossed. Next up we have the first-person shooter. This one is of course a very popular genre. You have the likes of Call of Duty, which has helmed the first-person shooter for a very long time, it feels like, and its competitor, Battlefield. You of course have Overwatch, which I've put a lot of hours into. I'm assuming you wouldn't count that as a first-person shooter. To me, it is. And you have the recent Doom, with a fantastic campaign and a very underrated multiplayer, so that's a very solid game as well. But at the end of the day, I can only ever really fall back to one game, and that is Halo 3. Halo 3 is another one of those games that is just legendary for many reasons. People have great memories on it because perhaps they had a bunch of LAN parties with their friends back in the day, hooked up Xboxes, ordered pizza, played some Halo against each other. Or maybe you were someone who liked to play co-op with your buddies, go after the Vidmaster achievements, which I also did, and that was very fun. Vidmaster achievements being the very high-end achievements to earn. You have to do particular things, and it's very hard. Or maybe you were just someone who soloed legendary difficulty with all modifiers because you're an absolute fucking savage. Regardless of your reason for playing Halo 3, I feel like many of us have had a lot of good times in it. And if you hadn't, that sucks for you because you're really missing out. That's just not even considering all of the custom maps you can make. I myself made a ton of custom maps, different puzzles or different game modes where it's like lightsaber battles on top of rocks. It was so much fun. There was a lot of hours poured into that game. And if you had to play the game, perhaps you recall the joy of pulling off a sniper shot, hitting 2 headshots in a row, boom, double kill, and then that announcer just hyping you up. He's like, "You're the best, double kill, triple kill." Over, you're like, "I know I'm the best, god damn it!" And then you know, someone with a sword comes up and kills you and you're really fucking pissed, but that's besides the point. It was great nonetheless. Next up we have the horror genre. This is a genre I very much like. And when I play this game, if I haven't risen several inches in my seat due to fecal matter leaking from my butt, it's not a good game. I want to be scared shitless and I want to have such an adrenaline rush that I just want more. Now, what games do that? You of course have Amnesia, which almost pioneered the cat and mouse like gameplay where you can't defend yourself really, but you just gotta hide and pray to Jesus. So Amnesia, great game. Is it the one? Not quite, not for me. You also have Outlast, very good game as well, similar concept. Or perhaps you want a more aggressive approach, like in Dead Space. Dead Space, when that first came out, blew my mind. The way you dismember enemies as a way of killing them versus just, you know, shooting them in the head like a little boring person. But for me, when I play a horror game, it's not about the action or how cool you feel or whatever. It's about how tense it is, how scared you were, how much it made you feel uncomfortable. And that has to go to Alien Isolation for me. I'm not alone in here. Ooh. Now, I've never watched the Alien franchise, actually. I've only ever really seen Alien and Alien vs. Predator, so I'm sorry, lynch me if you need to. But after playing this game, it definitely got me interested. It made me realize how terrifying the xenomorphs are. With an AI designed to appear like it's adapting to you, it feels like you're never safe. Or once you start to learn a way around the alien, it counters you. And now you can't do it anymore. Now you gotta figure out something else. Maybe you got that new equipment. Maybe you need to use that noisemaker a little better. That flamethrower, it's really sparse. You better make sure you're using it to defend yourself, because guess what? You can't kill it. And that's not even considering the humans and the creepy-ass robots. Yeah, they're nothing in comparison to the xenomorph, but they're still a threat that you need to acknowledge, or you'll get fucked. But one of the little cool thing is, to give you a little sense of power in this game, is you can distract the alien towards them and have the alien absolutely maul them to death. And that's always satisfying, feeling like you've just controlled the alien briefly until it, you know, turns around and guts you. But at the end of the day, for my horror genre pick, it has to go to Alien Isolation because nothing made me feel less safe than that game. Get back! Hopefully that was enough. Oh my god, that wasn't enough, was it? Next up, we have the platformer genre. And if you're a fan of the channel, or Mario in general, I guess, then you feel like, oh, Zach's gonna pick Mario. Well, shame on you, because I am so over Mario, it's not going to Mario. I'm sorry if that's what you're expecting. Yes, Mario is an absolute classic. There's no denying that. It definitely is one of the most iconic platforming, it probably is the most iconic platforming game out there. But I simply can't give it to Mario due to my lack of immersion, my lack of caring. And you might be thinking, it's a platformer. You just have fun, you just have a good time. There doesn't need to be immersion. You're right. But it helps. And now another good example of that would be Celeste. Recently everyone who's really liked it, I haven't played the full thing because I'm a terrible person, but Celeste was a very good platformer as well. However, this is one of the easiest choices on this list so far. For me, it is simply Ori and the Blind Forest. If you are remotely a fan of platforming games, then you absolutely need to try this game. It has a pretty compelling story that will get you invested in the characters very quickly. And then it has a combination of things going for it, aside from just the gameplay, which we'll get to in a second. It has the art, which is just phenomenal. That art I could never get tired of looking at. I get that shit on a poster for show. Next up you have the music, which is absolutely brilliant. I will have to play you a sample right now. And then there's the main character you play as Ori, which it's fucking adorable. Don't you dare say it's not. I swear to God, fight me if you think it's not. But at the end of the day, it is a platformer. So how does it feel? How are the controls? The feeling of a platformer is the most important thing. And it feels top goddamn notch. It is super responsive. The controls feel very intuitive when you, especially when you start learning double jump and whatnot. And then as you slowly learn more abilities on how to traverse the area, you get to new areas because maybe you didn't have this certain jump, or maybe you couldn't do this certain dash, and now you can, so now you can go there. Now you can go back and find secrets, and then upgrade your character to get more powerful. So there's a very good sense of progression, and in the beginning you feel very weak, very vulnerable, but by the end of it you're a goddamn badass Terminator, Ori creature spirit thing. And if by the end of it all you haven't mastered it, you're gonna have a bad time. It'll have some sequences where it expects you to use different moves back to back to back, flawlessly. And when you finally pull it off, it is so satisfying. Much more satisfying than I had gotten from any other platformer, which is one of the main reasons why I had to go with Ori and the Blind Forest. Next up we have my favorite genre personally, and that is RPG. Now what makes a good RPG a good RPG? A compelling story? A sense of progression, some very interesting characters. Yes, these are all very important aspects to an RPG. And being that it's my favorite genre, I was having a particularly hard time with this one because I love the Mass Effect series, the original 3, right? Andromeda, just put that aside. But I love the original 3 series. I loved an old school game some of you might have heard of, Kingdoms of Amalur. Very unnoticed game, it was pretty good though. And of course, I'm a fan of the Elder Scrolls series. I've really only played Oblivion and Skyrim, but had fun with them nonetheless. However, with all of that said, it's really hard for me to choose anything but The Witcher 3.
Folk have forgotten it.
Got other things on their mind.
Things like me.
They paid me for you.
In times past, no amount of coin would convince a Witcher to take this contract.
Times have changed.
Yes, you don't get to create your own character, which I usually prefer to do, but you get Geralt, who is an absolute savage. He gives absolutely zero fucks. Okay, well, he gives a decent amount out to Triss and Yennefer and other random people. He'll give them the fucks if they really remotely seem interested. But why do I choose The Witcher 3? Well, I mean, you've probably already heard about it, so I'm probably beating a dead horse. Let's start off with the characters. You have Geralt, who, again, absolute badass. You have your love interests, which I'm pretty sure people have murdered other people claiming their love is better. You have other witchers, you have a daughter figure, you have some bastard kings, you have an absolute asshole of a man, the Baron, who, you know, you kind of feel for, but you don't. Anyway, I'm not going to spoil anything here. Then you go to the combat, which is more than just a hack and slash. It's very strategic. Depending on the enemy you face is depending on how you want to prepare. Maybe you want to put on a certain oil so you have a better damage output towards them. Maybe you need to use a certain sign, a magic spell, so that you can't even hurt them in the first place. There's more than just swing your sword at them and hope they die. You gotta understand your enemy, and you gotta know how to deal with it. However, I think there's a certain part that makes The Witcher stand out more than any other game, and that's the side quests. Now, that might sound strange if you've never heard about The Witcher, like, why the side quests? But the reason is because of how much detail is put into each side quest. There's not a side quest out there that feels, you know, you're not just out there picking 10 herbs and returning them to someone and getting 30 experience. These all have their own stories and fleshed out characters that have reasons for asking you to do this, and normally it's not just kill this monster and come back. Usually you go to kill a monster, it turns out the monster was actually the ex-girlfriend who turns into a werewolf and was just trying to survive because they're all out to kill her, and you're just like, okay, didn't sign up for any of this. Can I just have Cole for not doing anything at this point? Then there's no easy moral line. There's no, oh, that's the good choice, that's the bad choice. Sometimes you just gotta choose the lesser of two evils. Maybe you gotta kill these 3 people to save a herd of children, or maybe you feel like the herd of children need to go because they're just annoying, and that's fine. You can choose the other one, you monster. Hell, there's a side quest to kill a certain high authority figure, let's say, and that could have been the main story in other games. So I am super impressed with just how immersed you get into the world of The Witcher, and I just can't pick anything other than that.
But when soul lies anxious, wide awake for the Witcher.
Now this is a bit of a different genre. This is a story-driven game with low emphasis on gameplay. Think something like the recent Detroit Become Human game, where the story was why you played it. You didn't play it because of the gameplay. In fact, the gameplay is essentially non-existent, just mostly QuickTime events. Things like that. While I absolutely love Detroit, and I think it was a very cool game, there's also other games out there that I feel are just as riveting. You also have games like The Life is Strange, which I've played 3 or 4 episodes and I need to finish it. I'm sorry everyone, waiting for the next episode, I'll get on it. So who knows, maybe if I had finished that game, that would have been the choice. However, I gotta go with the first season of The Walking Dead.
Well, I reckon you didn't do it then.
Why do you say that?
Now, I've driven a bunch of fellas down to this prison.
But that's not fair. That's an entire season. You gotta go with one episode if you're gonna do that.
Okay, Billy, first of all, shut the fuck up. Secondly, fine. If you want a single episode, the last one. But overall, I feel like the last one doesn't mean as much if you haven't played the whole thing. But if I had to choose a single episode, it'd be the last one. Why? Well, if you played it, you know why. But I don't think there's been a game that made me bawl as much as that game did. It absolutely emotionally wrecked me. And why is that, you may ask? Well, without spoiling anything, the main reason you are so invested is the relationship between Lee and Clementine, a girl you picked up and protected in the zombie apocalypse. Maybe you were one of the people who found her annoying initially, but over time, basically everyone comes to like Clementine, and they want to protect her. You would protect Clementine over anyone. If it doesn't matter who it is, but luckily you don't always need to because you have some pretty cool people in the group as well. This one's a little hard to talk about because I don't want to spoil it just in case someone hasn't played the game. But I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to go through and at the very least play the first season, because not only does the very end episode have heavy stuff, but leading up to that point there are several very, very memorable moments that are worth experiencing at least once.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry I wasn't here.
Next up we have the strategy genre, and much like the adventure genre, it typically is paired with something else which is as equivalent of importance. Think something like StarCraft. I'd consider it a strategy game. You need to strategize, but it's known as an RTS mainly. And then you also have something like going back to Overwatch, which I would say there's a large amount of strategy involved with that, but it's primarily known as a first-person shooter. So with that said, the choice of mine is in a similar position. where RPG is definitely one of the main focuses. However, it is very strategy based, and that is Divinity Original Sin. Now this is a game you can play solo or co-op with a friend, only one in the first one. The second one I haven't played yet, that's just why I'm not considering it, but apparently you can play up to 4 people co-op. In the first one though, even if you were under-leveled, as my friend and I were many times, we would go into a situation and after like an hour of moving the pieces around the way you need to, we would win. And that to me is what defines a strategy, is being able to overcome an obstacle that is beyond you. Where it's not just about damage numbers, it's about playing properly and doing things that help you win a fight. This type of game is much like XCOM in a way, where you have X amount of action points to work with, and moving takes up some, fighting, using spells, things like that, they all take up some action points, and the enemy also has some, and you take turns doing things during combat. And while in the beginning, it's a slow start, I'm not gonna lie, it took me a couple hours to really start feeling it. But eventually, you start learning how the game works, how helpful crafting is, what these later spells can do, and you start, I'm like a god! And then you realize well, I won't say any more than that, but the story itself, also, being that it's RPG, it has to have a decent story, right? Well, luckily it is fairly interesting. It's not interesting enough for me to not skip through some of the dialogue on some people, but I was still curious how it was all gonna go. Something cool too is if you're playing with your friend in co-op, you guys don't have to agree. So if you both are talking to a person, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll help, then your friend can say, no, I don't want to help him, and in-game your characters argue, and to determine what you go with, you play rock, paper, scissors. And now I've heard in every way that Divinity Original Sin 2 is better, so if I had to recommend one or the other, I'd probably go with that. But I haven't played it myself, which is why I'm going with the first Divinity Original Sin, because as far as strategy is concerned, not many other games were more satisfying than this one. And next we have the survival genre, a genre which was very popular for a while. You had the likes of Ark Survival Evolved, which is still going pretty strong. You had 7 Days to Die, that was a thing for a while. Remember DayZ? I don't know how that game's doing, but that was like taking the world by storm, it felt like, at least for me. But if you guys watch the channel, then you already know what I'm gonna pick. Because hands down, the best survival game, it has to go to Subnautica. Can I ask you? And we got a Gary fish. I'm gonna name you Gary, because you're fucking already named Gary. Wasn't that a surprise that you got named Gary? Shut the fuck up, Gary. But what makes Subnautica so interesting? Well, the world for one thing. You crash land on an alien planet, and it's all underwater essentially. Yeah, there's some land here and there, but you're primarily going to be taking place underwater. In that first dive you make into the water, to hear the music swell, to see these alien fish go by and all the creatures, you hear them all around you, it's just mesmerizing. There's not many games that can invoke that sense of wanting to explore, quite like Subnautica. And that feeling of when you first get in, you are so safe, you're like, oh, this is wonderful. And you go out a little bit and you hear a deep roar. You look up and you see a reef back. You think, is it dangerous? Is it not? I don't know. And you're kind of panicking a little bit. And then you come across Reaper Leviathan. Someone told me that... Whoa! Whoa! Holy fuck! And that's just a small taste as far as the creatures around are concerned. And get this, yes, it's a survival game, so you need to craft and take care of your hunger and your thirst and all that stuff, build a base. But there's actually a way to beat the game. And that actually feels extremely rare because typically it's just open-ended, you just do it forever. For me personally, I like feeling like I have a purpose, like there's a reason for doing it, a goal to obtain, whether it be in Minecraft to defeat the Ender Dragon, or in Ark to defeat a particular high-level dinosaur. But in Subnautica, you can straight up just beat the game. You can escape the planet. And not only do you just escape the planet, but there's a story too. There's a lot of lore in the world, and you find out what's happening to it, why certain things are occurring, who these mysterious voices are, and what happened to your crew members. You find all this out through things like PDAs, some actual voice comms, and there are other things I don't want to ruin because there's not many games like Subnautica that I wish I could experience for the first time again. So if you're interested in survival games, you gotta check it out, because of all the things on this list, Subnautica is definitely one of the best on there. And now for our last genre, which is virtual reality. Yes, this isn't a genre where everyone's going to be able to relate to immediately. However, if you tried it, maybe you want to know what the good one is. So there are plenty of cool experiences out there on VR already, where they're just short little tech demos or something. Maybe you have like an actual game like Robo Recall, which is a very satisfying game to play, not so much to watch. But at this point in time, how can you give it to anything else other than Resident Evil 7?
Dumb son of a bitch wasn't no good if it hit him.
Wow! Now, yes, it's kind of cheating because it's a game first before VR, if that makes sense, or it wasn't built specifically for it. However, as far as VR experiences are concerned, nothing really tops it. For one, it's a full game you play from start to finish, get invested in, and care about the story. Most VR games, you're just kind of along for the ride and just shooting and gunning your way through. This one, though, it's a lot different, a lot more methodical, and a whole lot more goddamn terrifying. Oh my god! The problem with VR is it's kind of a hard thing to sell unless you've actually tried it yourself. And if you're someone who's interested in VR, maybe PlayStation VR for example, because that's the cheaper option, understandably so, then I would suggest going for Resident Evil 7. Yes, it's a scary game, so if you can't handle scares, then maybe stay away from it. But if you don't mind the scares, or if you even enjoy the scares, I would highly recommend it. It's a very cool experience and very different from playing it in non-VR. If I had to give it a knock though, in terms of VR is concerned, it would be that there's not many things where you get a great sense of scale. I mean, yes, the buildings, you can get the sense of scale and everything, but it's not like there's some giant monster that like walks over you and you're like, oh my god, I'm tiny. Those kind of experiences are really cool. This doesn't have anything like that, but it has immersion like no other. So that's why I go with Resident Evil 7. And that does it for the list, everyone. That is my best game in 10 different genres. I don't really know how the structure of this all is going to be. This kind of thing is new to me, so hopefully it worked out a little bit. And yes, I know I gave more time to some games than I did to others, but there's sometimes spoiler things I wanted to avoid, and sometimes there's simply more to say and easier to talk about. But with all that said, I would love to hear what your favorite games in each of these genres is. Please write in the comments. And if there's any genres I didn't touch on that you would like me to, mention that as well. Maybe if I get enough of them, I'll do a second video. But with that said, everyone, thank you for checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.